Have you ever been told, clock out but stick around to finish this task? Or maybe your manager asked you to come in early to set up before your shift, but said, don't punch in until the customers arrive. This is what's known as working off the clock, and it's one of the most common wage violations in the United States. Here's the truth. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, if you are a non-exempt employee, you must be paid for all hours worked. That includes before or after your scheduled shift, during short breaks, or while performing tasks that benefit your employer. Your boss cannot legally require you to work off the clock, period. In this video, I'll break down what counts as off-the-clock work, why it's illegal, common tricks employers use, and how you can protect yourself if it happens to you. Part 1. The law, all hours worked must be paid. The Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, is the federal law that sets minimum wage and overtime rules. One of its core principles is simple. Employees must be paid for all hours worked. That means if you perform tasks that benefit your employer, you should be on the clock and compensated. What does hours worked actually mean? According to the Department of Labor, it includes all the time an employee is required to be on duty on the employer's premises or at a prescribed workplace. It also covers any time you're permitted to work, even if the employer didn't specifically request it. If your boss knows or has reason to know that you're working, the law says you must be paid. Let's put this into practice. Suppose you're a retail employee who is told to arrive 15 minutes early to set up displays. Even if your boss says, don't clock in until opening, those 15 minutes count as work and must be paid. Or imagine you're a restaurant server required to roll silverware after you've clocked out. Again, that's work, and the time belongs on your paycheck. The FLSA also requires overtime pay, time and a half, for hours worked beyond 40 in a week. So, if your off-the-clock tasks push your total hours past 40, your employer owes you not just straight time, but overtime. For example, if you're paid $15 an hour and worked 42 hours, including off-the-clock duties, the extra 2 hours should be paid at $22.50. Some employers argue that a few minutes here or there don't matter, but the Department of Labor recognizes that even small amounts of unpaid time can add up. Courts have ruled that while employers may disregard de minimis amounts of time that are truly insignificant and difficult to track, regularly requiring workers to put in 10 or 15 minutes unpaid is not trivial. It's a violation. So, the baseline is clear. Under federal law, if you are working, you must be paid. There are no loopholes that allow a boss to legally demand free labor. Part 2. Common tricks employers use to get off the clock work. Even though the law is clear, many employers still try to squeeze free labor out of workers. They often use subtle or not so subtle tricks to make employees believe off-the-clock work is just part of the job. Let's look at some of the most common tactics. One classic example is clocking out early. A manager might say, go ahead and clock out, but stay until the last customer leaves. It happens in retail stores, restaurants, and hospitality all the time. Workers are made to think that staying a little longer isn't a big deal. But legally, every minute you spend cleaning tables, locking doors, or helping a customer must be paid. Another common tactic is requiring employees to prepare before clocking in. Maybe you're told to come in early to set up equipment, start a computer system, or put on protective gear. But you can't punch in until the shift officially starts. That setup time counts as work. Courts have ruled that even tasks like logging into a company computer system or walking across a large plant floor to your station can be compensable time. Then there's after-hours wrap-up work. This could be counting a register, rolling silverware, cleaning tools, or filing reports. Employers sometimes expect you to finish these duties after you've clocked out, especially in jobs with closing shifts. But Again, the law says if the work benefits your employer, it must be on the clock. Some companies try to disguise off-the-clock work as training or meetings. They may ask employees to attend mandatory training sessions, safety briefings, or meetings without pay, especially if they happen before or after regular shifts. But under the FLSA, if attendance is mandatory or directly job-related, that time must be paid. Another trick is using technology. For example, requiring employees to answer emails, text messages, or phone calls from home without logging hours. With smartphones, many workers feel pressured to stay connected. But if you're responding to work-related communications outside your shift, you're still working, and you deserve to be paid. Finally, some employers rely on peer pressure or company culture. They may say things like, everyone stays late without pay, it shows dedication, or they may reward employees who put in unpaid time with better schedules or promotions. But cultural pressure doesn't change the law. Free labor is still illegal labor. So, while these tricks may feel like just how things are done, none of them excuse an employer from paying for every hour worked. If you've experienced these tactics, you're not alone, and the law is on your side. Part 3. Off-the-clock work and overtime violations. One reason off-the-clock work is such a serious issue is because it often leads directly to overtime violations. Remember, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, non-exempt employees must be paid time and a half for every hour worked over 40 in a single work week. Now imagine this. You're scheduled for 40 hours at a warehouse job, but your manager regularly asks you to come in 20 minutes early to set up and to stay 15 minutes late to clean up. That adds almost 3 unpaid hours every week. If you're already at 40 hours, those extra unpaid hours aren't just straight time violations, they're overtime violations. That means your employer owes you your hourly rate plus half again as much for each of those hours. Another example, in restaurants and retail, employees are often asked to finish closing duties off the clock. If a server or cashier works 45 hours but only gets paid for 40, that's 5 full hours of overtime stolen. At $15 an hour instead of $225, the employer owes $337.50. Multiply that across dozens of employees and weeks, and the theft quickly adds up to thousands or even millions of dollars. This is why the Department of Labor takes overtime violations so seriously. When an employer fails to pay for off-the-clock work that pushes employees beyond 40 hours, they're not just breaking one rule, they're breaking 2. Failure to pay for hours worked and failure to pay proper overtime. Courts have been clear. Employees cannot waive their right to overtime. Even if your boss says you agreed to a salary that covers everything, that's not a valid excuse unless you're truly exempt under the law. And many workers who are told they're exempt, like assistant managers who spend most of their time stocking shelves, are actually entitled to overtime. It's also worth noting that some states like California, Colorado, and Alaska add even stronger overtime rules. In California, for instance, employees earn overtime after 8 hours in a day, not just 40 in a week. Off-the-clock work that extends a shift past 8 hours could trigger daily overtime, creating additional liability for employers. So, when your boss tells you to finish tasks after clocking out, it isn't just stealing straight time, it could be stealing time and a half. And that's a violation that can cost employers heavily if workers take action. Part 4. Legal consequences for employers and how workers can fight back. When employers make workers put in time off the clock, they're not just cutting corners, they're breaking the law, and the penalties for that can be steep. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division, WHD, has authority to investigate wage violations. If an employer is found guilty of unpaid off-the-clock work, they may be ordered to pay back wages for every affected employee. On top of that, they can also be required to pay an equal amount in liquidated damages, basically a penalty equal to what they already owe. That means if a company owes a worker $2,000 in unpaid wages, they may be forced to pay $4,000 total. In addition to back pay, employers can face civil monetary penalties for repeated or willful violations, up to $1,000 per violation. In extreme cases, criminal charges are possible, though rare. But even civil lawsuits can be devastating. Workers can file individual claims or join together in collective actions, where dozens or even hundreds of employees sue for unpaid time. These cases often end in large settlements, sometimes in the millions. For workers, the process of fighting back usually starts with documentation. Keeping your own records, notes of start and end times, screenshots of schedules, copies of pay stubs, can be powerful evidence if your employer's records are incomplete or inaccurate. Courts have consistently held that if an employer fails to keep proper time records, a worker's reasonable estimates can be enough to prove a claim. Next, workers can file a complaint directly with the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division. Investigations are confidential, and the WBUHD has recovered billions in back wages for employees over the years. Many states also have their own labor enforcement agencies, which may provide even faster remedies, especially where state wage laws are stronger. And importantly, the law strictly prohibits retaliation. Your employer cannot legally fire you, cut your hours, demote you, or punish you in any way for asserting your rights or filing a complaint. If they do, that's a separate violation with its own legal consequences. So, while employers might assume they can get away with a few unpaid minutes here or there, the reality is that off-the-clock violations can expose them to massive financial liability and government enforcement. For workers, that means you don't have to accept it. There are clear legal tools to recover what you're owed. Part 5. Real-world examples and how workers can protect themselves. To understand how serious off-the-clock work can be, let's look at some real-world situations. In 2020, a group of retail workers at a national clothing chain sued after being required to undergo mandatory bag checks after their shifts without being paid. Those few minutes, repeated every day for thousands of employees, added up to millions in unpaid wages. The company ended up settling for a large sum. In another case, fast food workers were told to clock out and then clean the store for an hour. When they brought the issue to the Department of Labor, investigators found clear violations. The employer had to pay back wages plus damages, and word spread quickly that workers had been shortchanged. So, what can you do to protect yourself if you think your boss is making you work off the clock? Track your time carefully. Write down when you start, when you stop, and any tasks you do off the clock. Even small increments matter. Compare your notes to your pay stubs. If your paycheck doesn't match the hours you worked, you may have a claim. Speak up early. Sometimes employers fix errors when they're caught. But if not, you can file a complaint with the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division or with your state labor board. Know your rights. If your work benefits your employer, it must be paid. That includes setup time, cleanup, mandatory training, waiting on customers, and even answering work emails at home. Remember anti-retaliation protections. The law is on your side if your employer tries to punish you for asserting your rights. It's also worth connecting with other workers. Off-the-clock violations rarely affect just one person. They're often company-wide practices. When employees band together, they can bring stronger claims and protect each other. The takeaway is simple. Working off the clock is not part of being a team player. It's wage theft. And whether it's 10 minutes a day or 10 hours a week. The law says you must be paid for every minute you work. So, can your boss make you work off the clock? The answer is no. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, if you are a non-exempt employee, every minute you spend working must be paid, whether it's before your shift, after your shift, during training, or while answering emails at home. Off-the-clock work isn't just unfair, it's illegal wage theft. If this is happening to you, remember, keep records, compare them to your paycheck, and don't be afraid to speak up. You can file a complaint with the Department of Labor or your state labor agency, and the law protects you from retaliation. If this video helped clarify your rights, hit like, share it with a coworker, and subscribe for more plain English explanations of workplace law. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever been asked to work off the clock?